The dropship screamed through Cryos's atmosphere like a dying beast, its heat shields glowing white-hot against the planet's unforgiving entry corridor. Marcus Kane gripped his harness and watched the temperature gauges climb into the red. 20 years of combat drops, and this one still made his teeth ache. "Breaker, you look like you're about to puke," shouted Kalen from across the cramped cabin. His scarred face split in a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Don't tell me the great Marcus Kane is getting soft." Marcus forced a laugh. "Just wondering if the Alliance bothered to maintain these rust buckets since the last war. This thing's older than both of us combined." "Everything's older than us in this war," Kalen shot back, "including the grudges." The dropship lurched violently, throwing them against their restraints. Through the porthole, Marcus caught glimpses of Draveris below a sprawling metropolis carved from ice and steel, half of it still smoldering from the latest bombardment. The Volari capital looked like a broken crown, its crystalline towers catching the pale light of Cryos's twin suns. 2 minutes to touchdown," the pilot's voice crackled through the comm. "Welcome back to hell, gentlemen." Marcus checked his weapon for the third time, a habit that had kept him alive through more battles than he cared to count. The plasma rifle hummed with barely contained energy, its weight familiar and comforting in his hands. Next to him, Dr. Harlan Miles fumbled with his medical kit, muttering curses under his breath. "Remind me again why a psychiatrist needs to be in the drop zone," Harlan asked, his usually composed demeanor cracking slightly. "Because the brass wants a full psychological profile of our target," Marcus replied, not bothering to hide his sarcasm. "Apparently, understanding the enemy's mind is the new winning strategy." "Right, because the old strategy of shooting them worked so well." Harlan's dry humor was intact, despite his obvious nervousness. The dropship hit the landing pad hard, sending a shock through Marcus's spine. The rear hatch hissed open, revealing the frozen hellscape of Cryos. The air that rushed in was so cold it burned his lungs, carrying with it the acrid smell of plasma discharge and something else, that distinctive metallic tang that meant Volari blood had been spilled recently. Marcus was first out, his boots crunching on the ice-covered tarmac. The landing zone was a makeshift military base carved into the ruins of what had once been a Volari cultural center. Human soldiers moved between prefab structures, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. In the distance, the distinctive whine of Volari patrol craft echoed off the mountains. "Kane!" A voice called out. Marcus turned to see Commander Sarah Cross striding toward them, her thermal armor crackling with frost. She was one of the few officers Marcus actually respected, a veteran who'd earned her rank in blood rather than politics. "Commander," Marcus nodded. "Heard you requested me specifically. Must be something special if you're pulling me out of retirement." Cross's expression was grim. "Walk with me." They moved away from the landing pad, toward a command bunker that had been hastily erected against the remains of a Volari monument. The structure depicted their warriors in their full glory, tall, graceful figures with scales that shimmered like oil on water, their forearms raised in what might have been celebration or combat. "You know why they call you the Breaker?" Cross asked as they walked. "Because I break things. People, mainly." "No." She stopped, turning to face him. "Because you break stalemates. Every conflict you've been involved in, you've found a way to end it. Not always pretty, but always final." Marcus waited. There was more coming. "The war here on Cryos has been grinding on for 3 years. We've lost 40,000 soldiers. The Volari have lost twice that, maybe more. The Senate wants it ended." "So end it. You've got enough firepower here to glass half the planet." Cross's jaw tightened. "That's not an option. Cryos has resources. We need rare minerals that make our FTL drives possible. We destroy this place. We cripple our own fleet for the next century. So what's the plan? Another peace treaty that'll last until someone gets bored?" "No treaties." Cross pulled out a holopad, activating it with a touch. A 3-dimensional image materialized of Volari female, her scales a deep purple that shifted to blue at the edges. Her four eyes arranged in a diamond pattern that gave her an almost ethereal beauty. This is Arya Vera. She leads the Volari resistance forces in this sector. Intelligence suggests she's the one keeping their military coordinated, despite our disruption efforts. Marcus studied the image. Even in the static hologram, there was something fierce about her posture, the way she held herself like a blade waiting to strike. "You want me to kill her?" "I want you to end the war," Cross corrected. "How you do it is up to you. But our intel says she'll be at a gathering tomorrow night, a memorial for their fallen, held in the old observatory on the city's edge. Security will be minimal. They think we don't know about it. And you want me to walk in and put a plasma bolt through her head in front of her people. That'll definitely calm things down." Cross's expression didn't change. "I told you. How you do it is up to you. But Marcus," she paused, seeming to weigh her words. "There's something else. We've been intercepting Volari communications. There's chatter about a shift in their command structure. Some of their military units have gone dark. Could be nothing. Could be internal conflict. Either way, it might be an opportunity." Marcus took the holopad, downloading the mission data to his neural implant. The information flooded his consciousness maps, personnel files, tactical assessments. His augmented mind processed it all in seconds, already forming potential strategies. "I'll need a small team," he said finally. "No more than 3 others. And I want full operational autonomy. No oversight. No second-guessing from command." "Done!" Cross's agreement came too quickly. She was desperate. "One more thing," Marcus added. "If this goes sideways, I want extraction guarantees for my team. No leaving anyone behind because it's politically inconvenient." "You have my word." Marcus almost laughed. In his experience, an officer's word was worth about as much as Volari promises of peace. But Cross had been in the trenches. Maybe that counted for something. As they returned to the main compound, Kalen fell into step beside him. "So, we're really doing this another assassination mission?" "Looks like it. You know what they say about the Volari. They don't forget, and they don't forgive. You kill one of their leaders, they'll burn worlds to settle the score." Marcus shrugged. "Then we'd better make sure we kill the right one." The briefing room was a converted Volari structure, its organic architecture clashing with the human technology bolted onto every surface. Marcus stood at the central holotable, watching as the observatory materialized in 3-dimensional detail. The building was a marvel of Volari engineering, a crystalline dome that could withstand direct orbital bombardment, with only 3 entrance points. "The memorial ceremony begins at sunset," Cross explained, manipulating the hologram to show approach routes. "Our intel suggests approximately 200 Volari will attend, mostly civilians. Arya Vera will give a speech from this platform." She highlighted a raised dais in the center of the main chamber. "Civilians," Harlan muttered from his corner. "We're really going to open fire on civilians?" "No one said anything about opening fire on civilians," Marcus said quietly, but his tone carried an edge. "I don't do massacres." "Then how?" "Let me worry about that." Marcus turned to study the Volari female's image again. There was something about her eyes, all 4 of them, that suggested intelligence beyond mere military cunning. "Tell me more about her. Not the military stuff. Who is she?" Cross pulled up additional files. "Arya Vera, age approximately 34 standard years. Former scientist, specialized in xenobiology before the war. Her entire research team was killed in one of the early bombardments, our bombardments. She joined the resistance shortly after. Family. Parents deceased. No offspring. There were rumors of a bonding partner, but he was killed in action last year. Since then, she's been..." Cross searched for the right word. "Relentless." Marcus nodded slowly. A scientist turned warrior, driven by loss. He'd seen that transformation before, usually in humans. It never ended well. What about this internal conflict you mentioned? Cross hesitated, then pulled up intercepted communications. 3 days ago, several Volari military units refused direct orders from High Marshal Serac. They were supposed to launch an attack on our supply lines but stood down. Serac's response was extreme. He had the unit commanders executed publicly. Executed his own people. Kalen whistled low. That's cold, even for the scales. The derogatory term made Marcus frown, but he didn't comment. Instead, he focused on the tactical implications. So, Serac's losing control. That's why you want Arya dead. She's the one holding them together despite him. That's the assessment, yes. Marcus straightened. Decision made. I'll need the doctor with me, despite his objections. His psychological insights might be useful. Kalen for tactical support. And, he paused, considering. I want access to a Volari prisoner. Someone who's been in their military recently. What for? Information. Real information. Not the propaganda both sides are feeding their troops. Marcus met Cross's gaze. If I'm going to end this war, I need to understand it first. Cross nodded slowly. There's a holding facility in Sector 4. Several prisoners from the last engagement. But Marcus, we don't have much time. The memorial is tomorrow night. Then I'd better get started. The holding facility was a grim place. All harsh lights and bare metal. The cells were designed to suppress the Volari's natural abilities. Their scales could harden to deflect projectiles. And their secondary arms were stronger than they looked. The dampening fields kept them docile. But Marcus could see the hatred burning in their eyes as he passed. He stopped at the last cell, where a young Volari male sat hunched in the corner. Unlike the others, this one didn't look up as Marcus approached. His scales were a dull gray, lacking the iridescent quality that marked a healthy Volari. What's wrong with this one? Marcus asked the guard. Refused to eat for the past week. Medical says he'll last maybe another few days. Marcus studied the prisoner. There was something different about him, a quality of defeat that went beyond mere capture. Open it. Sir, that's not... Open it. The guard complied reluctantly, and Marcus stepped inside. The Volari didn't move, didn't even acknowledge his presence. Up close, Marcus could see scarring across his scales, not from human weapons, but from Volari plasma burns. The distinctive spiral pattern was unmistakable. Your own people did that to you, Marcus said quietly, sitting down against the opposite wall. For the first time, the Volari looked up. His 4 eyes were dull, but there was a flicker of surprise at hearing his own language. Marcus's neural implant had translation protocols for most known languages, though speaking Volari always felt like gargling broken glass. You speak the true tongue, the prisoner said, his voice barely above a whisper. I speak many tongues. It helps me understand my enemies. Are we enemies? The Volari's laugh was bitter. I no longer know who my enemies are. Marcus leaned forward slightly. What's your name? Theron. I was Theron of the 3rd Spiral Brigade. Now I am nothing. The 3rd Spiral, you were one of the units that refused to attack our supply lines. Theron's eyes widened slightly. You know of this? I know many things. I also know that Serac had your commanders executed. But those burns on your scales, that was before the execution. Wasn't it? Theron was silent for a long moment. Then, we refused because the target was not your supply lines. It was a Volari refugee camp. Serac wanted us to attack our own people and blame it on humans. When we refused, he touched the scars unconsciously. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. False flag operations were the darkest kind of warfare, but attacking one's own civilians, that was a special kind of evil. Tell me about Arya Vera, Marcus said. Theron's entire demeanor changed, a mix of reverence and fear crossing his features. The Nightwalker, she was everything Serac is not. She fights for Volari freedom, not for power. Many follow her because they believe in her vision of victory without genocide. Without genocide, Serac preaches the extinction of humanity, says it is the only way to ensure Valari survival. But Arya, she speaks of victory through strength, not extermination. It's why Serac fears her. Fears her, she's his military commander. Theron made a sound that might have been another bitter laugh. She is a symbol he cannot control. The people love her. The soldiers trust her. If she ever turned against him... He trailed off. Then, looked directly at Marcus. Why do you ask these questions? Human. Have you come to gloat before I die? No. Marcus stood. I've come to understand. Thank you. Theron... As he turned to leave, Theron called out, Human. Whatever you plan to do, know this Arya Vera is the only reason this war has not become a slaughter on both sides. She holds back Serac's worst impulses. Without her... Marcus paused at the cell door. Without her? What? Without her. Serac will burn your worlds and ours to satisfy his hatred. She is not your enemy. She is the only thing standing between both our peoples and annihilation. Marcus left the holding facility with his mind racing. Everything about this mission had just become infinitely more complicated. He'd been sent to assassinate the one person who might be preventing genocide. But if he didn't complete the mission, the war would continue grinding both species into dust. He found Harlan and Kalen waiting in the briefing room, studying the observatory plans. We have a problem, Marcus announced. Just one. Harlan's attempt at humor fell flat when he saw Marcus's expression. Marcus relayed his conversation with Theron, watching as both men processed the implications. So we're supposed to kill the moderate and leave the extremist in charge. Kalen shook his head. That's insane. It's also our orders, Marcus reminded him. Since when do you care about orders? Harlan asked. You're the breaker. You famously told General Morrison to take his orders and... I know what I said. Marcus cut him off. But this is different. If we don't act, the war continues. If we kill Arya, we might trigger something worse. So what do we do? Marcus stared at the holographic image of Arya Vera, decision crystallizing in his mind. We go to the memorial as planned, but we don't kill her. We take her. Kidnap a Valari military commander from the middle of a memorial service. Kalen looked skeptical. That's your plan. Part of it. The other part involves making sure Serac thinks she's dead. And how do we do that? Marcus smiled a cold, calculating expression that reminded both men why he was called the Breaker. We give him what he wants to see. Doctor, I need you to access the medical database. Find me everything on Valari physiology, specifically their regenerative capabilities, and how to suppress them temporarily. You're going to fake her death. Harlan's eyes widened with understanding. I'm going to do more than that. I'm going to break this entire war apart. But first, we need to get close enough to Arya Vera to make her understand that we're trying to save her life, not end it. And if she doesn't believe us... Marcus checked his weapon again, that familiar weight bringing cold comfort. Then we improvise. The next day passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus studied every piece of intelligence they had on Arya Vera, building a psychological profile that went beyond military strategy. She was brilliant. Her scientific papers on xenobiology showed a mind capable of seeing patterns others missed. She was also principled, refusing to use biological weapons despite having the knowledge to create them. But it was the personal details that interested Marcus most. She had a habit of touching her scales when thinking, specifically, the ones along her secondary arms. She preferred to stand with her back to walls, a sign of paranoia or tactical awareness. Maybe both. And according to intercepted communications, she often quoted ancient Valari poetry in her speeches, particularly verses about sacrifice and redemption. You're overthinking this, Kalen said, watching Marcus pore over the data for the 10th time. We go in, grab her, get out. Simple. Nothing about this is simple. Marcus pulled up a map of the observatory. Look at the security placement. It's all wrong. Kalen studied the positions of the Volari guards. They're facing outward. All of them. Exactly. Standard security would have at least 30% facing inward, watching the crowd. But these positions, it's like they're expecting an external attack, not an internal threat. Or they trust everyone who'll be inside, Harlan suggested. Or that, Marcus frowned. But it could also mean... An alarm cut through his thoughts. The base's defensive systems had activated, filling the air with the sharp whine of charging weapons. Through the window, Marcus could see soldiers running to defensive positions. Cross's voice crackled over the comm. We've got incoming, 3 Volari assault craft, approaching fast. All personnel to battle stations. Marcus grabbed his gear, but something felt wrong. The timing was too convenient, too precise. As he reached the door, another thought struck him. The memorial, he said. It's tonight. This attack, it's a distraction. From what? Kalen asked, already suiting up. I don't know, but... Marcus's neural implant suddenly flared with activity, intercepting an encrypted Volari transmission. His translation protocols kicked in, decoding the message in real time. Nightwalker to all units. The false sun rises. Repeat. The false sun rises. Initiate contingency 7. Marcus's blood ran cold. He'd studied enough Volari military codes to recognize a coup signal when he heard one. Aria Vera wasn't attending a memorial. She was leading a revolution. Change of plans, he announced, grabbing his rifle. We're going to that observatory now. Now, in the middle of an attack. Not in the middle of it. Because of it. Marcus activated his tactical display, showing the positions of the incoming Volari craft. Look at their approach vectors. They're not trying to maximize damage. They're trying to draw our forces to specific defensive positions. Understanding dawned on Kalen's face. They're clearing a path. Exactly. And I'm betting that path leads straight to the observatory. Marcus turned to Harlan. Doctor, you're with us. Whatever's about to happen there, I have a feeling we're going to need someone who understands how people think when their world falls apart. They commandeered a stealth transport, its adaptive camouflage flickering to life as Kalen powered up the engines. The base was chaos. Soldiers running in all directions. Defensive turrets filling the sky with streams of plasma. But Marcus noticed what others missed. The Volari attack craft weren't pressing their advantage. They were maintaining distance, keeping the human forces engaged, but not committed. It's all theater, he muttered. The transport lifted off, sliding between buildings as Kalen piloted with practiced ease. The observatory was 12 kilometers away, its crystalline dome visible even through the smoke of battle. As they approached, Marcus saw he'd been right. The area around the building was mysteriously clear of both human and Volari forces. Set us down here, Marcus ordered, pointing to a frozen ravine half a kilometer from the observatory. We go the rest of the way on foot. The cold hit them like a physical blow as they exited the transport. Even through their thermal suits, the temperature was brutal. Ice crystals formed on their visors within seconds, and each breath felt like swallowing needles. They moved quickly, but carefully, using the terrain for cover. As they approached the observatory, Marcus could see lights inside, hundreds of them, moving in patterns that suggested a large gathering. But there was no celebration in those movements. This was something else. Motion sensors are picking up at least 300 individuals inside, Kalen reported, checking a scanner. But the patterns are weird. They're all facing the same direction, not mingling like you'd expect at a memorial. Because it's not a memorial, Marcus said. It's a trial. They reached a maintenance entrance, its lock already disengaged. Someone had wanted this door accessible. Marcus took point, rifle raised, as they entered the building. The interior was warmer, but no less alien walls that seemed to pulse with bioluminescent light. Corridors that curved in ways that hurt human eyes to follow. They could hear voices now, speaking in Valari. Marcus's implant translated in real time. Cannot continue to serve a leader who murders his own people. The humans are not our true enemy. Serac has betrayed everything we stand for. They reached an observation deck overlooking the main chamber. Below, Marcus saw a scene that confirmed his suspicions. Hundreds of Valari, both military and civilian, stood in neat rows, facing a raised platform. On that platform stood Arya Vera, her scales shimmering with an inner light that seemed to pulse with her words. But she wasn't alone. Beside her, bound in energy restraints, knelt a figure that made Marcus's breath catch. High Marshal Serac himself, the supreme commander of all Valari forces, was on trial before his own people. By the ancient laws of our people, Arya was saying, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. A leader who spills the blood of innocents forfeits the right to lead. Serac ordered the deaths of our own civilians to justify his war. He has become the very evil he claims to fight against. Serac raised his head, his scales a deep red that spoke of rage. You dare judge me. Little scientist, I have led our people through 3 years of war. Every death was necessary. Every sacrifice required. Necessary. Arya's voice turned cold. Was it necessary to burn the refugee camp at Thylos, to execute loyal soldiers who refused your madness, to sell our children's future for your personal vendetta? The crowd stirred, anger rippling through them like a wave. Marcus realized he was witnessing something unprecedented, a Valari military coup happening in real time. We need to call this in, Kalen whispered. Command needs to know. No, Marcus said quietly. We watch. We wait. For what? Before Marcus could answer, Serac broke free. The energy restraints shattered in a burst of light, and the High Marshal moved with inhuman speed. His secondary arms extended, revealing concealed plasma blades that hummed with lethal energy. He lunged at Arya, who barely managed to dodge, her own weapons materializing from hidden compartments in her armor. The crowd scattered as the two leaders fought, their combat a deadly dance of scale and blade. Serac was larger, stronger, his experience evident in every move. But Arya was faster, more agile, using the chamber's architecture to her advantage. Should we intervene? Harlan asked, his face pale as he watched the brutal fight. Not yet, Marcus said, but his finger rested on his rifle's trigger. The battle turned when Serac grabbed Arya with his primary arms, lifting her off the ground. His plasma blade rose for a killing strike, and stopped. Arya had produced a small device, pressing it against Serac's chest. The High Marshal's eyes widened in recognition and fear. A neural disruptor, he gasped. You wouldn't. It would kill us both. Would it? Arya's voice was calm despite her precarious position. Or would it only kill the one whose neural patterns are already compromised by the cognitive enhancers you've been taking? Oh yes, Serac. I know about the drugs, the paranoia, the aggression, the slow descent into madness. You're not leading our people, you're destroying them from within. The chamber was silent, everyone frozen in place. Marcus found himself holding his breath. You want to die a martyr, Arya continued. To have your death trigger the final war you've always wanted. I won't give you that satisfaction. She activated the device. Serac convulsed, his grip loosening as neural feedback coursed through his system. But instead of killing him, the device seemed to be doing something else, stripping away layers of conditioning, chemical influences, years of programmed hatred. When it finished, Serac collapsed, his scales fading to a dull gray. He looked up at Arya with eyes that seemed to see clearly for the first time in years. What have I done? What you were programmed to do, Arya said, not unkindly. The question now is what you choose to do next. It was at that moment that Marcus made his decision. He stood, making himself visible to the crowd below. Hundreds of Valari eyes turned to him, weapons raising in alarm. "I am Marcus Kane of the Terran Alliance," he called out, his voice amplified by his suit's speakers. "I was sent here to kill Arya Vera, but I'm not going to do that." The chamber erupted in chaos. Valari soldiers moved to defensive positions, weapons trained on the observation deck. But Arya raised a hand, and they held their fire. "The human speaks truth," she said, her 4 eyes fixed on Marcus. "I knew he was coming, just as I knew Serac would try to kill me tonight. Sometimes, the best way to end a war is to let all the pieces fall where they will." She turned to address both the Valari crowd and Marcus simultaneously. "High Marshal Serac will stand trial for his crimes. But his trial is not the end, it is the beginning. For too long, both our peoples have been led by those who profit from war. Tonight, that changes." Marcus lowered his rifle, making a decision that would either end the war or end his life. "I want to talk, face to face. No weapons, no tricks, just truth." Arya studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Come down, Marcus Kane. Let us speak of endings and beginnings." As Marcus made his way down to the main chamber, Kalen grabbed his arm. "This is insane. You're walking into a room full of enemies." "No," Marcus said, gently removing his friend's hand. "I'm walking into a room full of people who are just as tired of dying as we are." He entered the main chamber, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him. The Valari parted as he approached, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely contained rage. But none attacked. They waited, watching to see what their leader would do. Arya stood at the center of the platform. Her scales now shifted to a neutral blue. Up close, Marcus could see the exhaustion in her posture, the weight of leadership and loss etched into every line of her body. But there was something else, too, a spark of hope that refused to die. "You came to kill me," she said simply. "I came to end the war," Marcus corrected. "I thought killing you would do that. I was wrong. And now—" Marcus looked around the chamber, at the faces of beings he'd been taught to hate and fear. "Now I think maybe we can end it together. But first, I need to know something. The attack on our base tonight, it wasn't real. Was it?" A ghost of a smile touched Arya's features. "Real enough to keep your forces busy. Not real enough to cause lasting harm. I needed this gathering to happen without interference. You knew I would come. I hoped you would come. There's a difference." She gestured to Serac, who sat slumped on the floor, guarded but unrestrained. "He was becoming unstable. The drugs, the paranoia, the false flag operations, it all had to end. But if I had simply killed him, his followers would have turned him into a martyr. This way, with witnesses from both military and civilian sectors. His crimes are undeniable. And my presence here makes it impossible for him to claim this was a human plot." Arya's 4 eyes fixed on Marcus with an intensity that was almost physical. "You're not the only one who studies their enemy, Marcus Kane. I know your reputation, the breaker, the one who ends wars. I gambled that when you learned the truth, you would make the right choice. You gambled a lot of lives on that. I did. Just as you gambled when you walked into this room." She extended one of her secondary arms, palm up, a gesture of peace among the Valari. "So, Marcus Kane, will you help me break this war? Not with violence, but with truth." Marcus looked at her outstretched hand, then at the crowd watching them. He thought of the thousands dead on both sides, the worlds burning, the children growing up knowing only hatred. He thought of Theron in his cell, scarred by his own people. He thought of all the wars he'd ended with violence, and how they always led to new wars, new hatreds. He took her hand. The crowd gasped. A human touching a Valarian peace was something most had never seen. But Marcus wasn't done. He turned to address them, his neural implant translating his words into perfect Valari. I came here as your enemy, but I stand here now as someone who has seen too much death, too much waste. Your leader is right. We have all been led by those who profit from our hatred. But we can choose differently. We can choose to break the cycle. An elderly Valari stepped forward from the crowd, his scales weathered with age. Pretty words, human. But words don't erase the blood that has been spilled. No, Marcus agreed. They don't. But they can prevent more from being spilled. I'm not asking for forgiveness or forgetting. I'm asking for a chance to find another way. And your alliance, another voice called out. Will they accept peace? Marcus thought of Commander Cross, of the Senate's demands, of the military-industrial complex that fed on conflict. Some will, others won't. But that's true on both sides, isn't it? Arya squeezed his hand gently, a signal of support. Change doesn't happen overnight, but it has to start somewhere. Tonight, in this room, with these witnesses, we plant the seed. She turned to Serac, who had been watching the exchange with hollow eyes. High Marshal, you stand accused of crimes against both Valari and human. Do you have anything to say? Serac struggled to his feet, his movement sluggish from the neural disruptor's effects. When he spoke, his voice was different, clearer, but filled with anguish. I remember everything, every order, every death. I told myself it was necessary, that our survival depended on total victory. But somewhere, I lost myself. The drugs helped me not feel, not question. But now, he looked at his hands as if seeing blood on them for the first time. I cannot undo what I have done. I can only accept judgment. Then you will be held until a formal trial can be arranged, Arya declared, with representatives from both Valari and human observers, to ensure justice is seen by all. Marcus felt the shift in the room, uncertainty giving way to possibility. But he also knew how fragile this moment was. One wrong word, one act of violence, and everything would shatter. It was Harlan who broke the tension. The doctor had made his way down to the main floor, his medical kit in hand. He approached one of the wounded Valari guards, who had been injured in Serac's escape attempt. May I? He asked Arya, gesturing to the guard. She nodded. And Harlan knelt beside the injured Valari, his hands gentle as he examined the wounds. The sight of a human tending to a Valari soldier sent another ripple through the crowd. The wound is deep but not fatal, Harlan announced, pulling out his medical supplies. I can stabilize him, but he'll need proper Valari medical attention soon. As Harlan worked, Marcus noticed something else. Kalen had taken up a defensive position, but his weapon was lowered, his posture non-threatening. He was protecting the doctor, but also showing trust. Your men, Arya observed. They follow your lead without question. They trust me, Marcus said simply, just as your people trust you. Trust? Arya spoke the word like it was foreign. Such a fragile thing to build a peace on. Stronger than hate, Marcus countered. Hate burns out. Trust, properly nurtured, can last generations. A younger Valari, barely past adolescence by the look of his scales, pushed through the crowd. Commander Vera, the human base is responding to the attack. They're mobilizing additional forces. Arya looked at Marcus. Your people will come looking for you. Let them come, Marcus decided. In fact, invite them. Let Commander Cross see what's happening here. Let her report back that the Valari are holding their own leaders accountable for war crimes. You would risk that your own people might see you as a traitor. Marcus thought of all the wars he'd ended, all the violence he'd perpetrated in the name of peace. I've been called worse, and if it prevents more death, it's worth the risk. Arya was quiet for a moment, then turned to her communication officer. Send a message to the human base. Tell them Marcus Kane is unharmed and participating in negotiations for cessation of hostilities. Invite their commander to witness Sarak's confession. As the message was sent, Marcus became aware of how surreal the situation was. Hours ago, he'd been planning an assassination. Now he stood hand in hand with his target, surrounded by enemies who were slowly becoming something else. Not friends, perhaps, but no longer foes. "You know this won't be easy," Arya said quietly, for his ears alone. "There are those among my people who want vengeance, just as there are among yours." "I know, but you were right earlier, it has to start somewhere." She studied him with those 4 eyes, and Marcus felt like she was seeing through all his defenses, all his carefully constructed walls. "You've ended many wars, Marcus Kane, but have you ever tried to build a peace?" The question hit harder than any physical blow. "No," he admitted. "I've always been better at breaking things than building them." "Then perhaps it's time you learned." There was something in her voice: challenge, invitation, hope, all mixed together. Before Marcus could respond, the main entrance to the observatory burst open. Commander Cross entered with a full tactical team, weapons raised. The Valari immediately went defensive, the fragile peace threatening to shatter. "Hold!" Marcus shouted, stepping between the two groups. "Everyone stand down." Cross's eyes widened as she took in the scene: Marcus standing beside Arya Vera, Harlan treating Valari wounded, Sarak restrained but alive. "Kane, what the hell is going on here?" "The war is ending, Commander. Not with assassination, but with justice." He gestured to Sarak. "The High Marshal has confessed to war crimes, including false flag operations against his own people. The Valari are prepared to negotiate for real peace." Cross's weapon remained raised. "That's not your call to make, soldier." "No," Marcus agreed. "It's not, but it's the right call, and you know it. How many more have to die before we admit this war serves no one but those who profit from it?" "Pretty speeches won't bring back our dead," Cross said. But Marcus could hear the uncertainty in her voice. It was Arya who stepped forward, her hands visibly empty of weapons. "Commander Cross, I am Arya Vera. I know you were ordered to have me killed. I don't blame you for that in war. We all follow orders we question. But tonight, we have a chance to stop following those orders and start making better choices." "You're the enemy," Cross said, but the words lacked conviction. "I was, just as you were mine. But enemies are made, Commander, not born. And what is made can be unmade, if we have the courage." The standoff stretched, tension crackling like electricity through the chamber. Then, slowly, Cross lowered her weapon. "The Senate will never accept this," she said. "Then we convince them," Marcus said. "We show them the evidence of Sarak's crimes. We demonstrate that peace is possible. We make them see that continuing the war benefits no one but the war profiteers." Cross looked around the chamber, taking in the mix of Valari military and civilians, the wounded being tended by human and Valari alike, the impossible scene of cooperation. "You realize what you're asking. You're talking about overturning 3 years of propaganda, of hate." "3 years of hate," Arya said, "or 3,000 years of peace. Which would you choose for your children, Commander?" The question hung in the air. Marcus watched Cross wrestle with duty and possibility, with orders and conscience. Finally, she activated her calm. "Base, this is Cross. Situation at the observatory is complex. Stand down from combat alert. I repeat, stand down. We have a potential diplomatic solution in progress." The relief in the chamber was palpable. Weapons lowered on both sides, though trust was still far from established. "You have 1 hour to convince me this can work," Cross told Marcus. "After that, I follow my original orders." 1 hour to end a war, Marcus smiled grimly. "I've worked with less." As the various groups began to tentatively interact, Cross's soldiers maintaining perimeter, while Valari guards did the same, Marcus found himself alone with Arya for a moment. "You took a tremendous risk tonight," he said. "So did you. We both gambled everything on the hope that the other would see reason. And if I had taken the shot, Arya's scales shifted to a deeper blue. Then, at least my death might have meant something. Serac would have been exposed, and perhaps someone else would have carried on the work of peace. You were willing to die for this. I've been willing to die for 3 years, she said simply. Tonight was the first time I've been willing to live for something. The weight of her words settled over Marcus. He'd spent so long as the breaker, the ender of conflicts, that he'd forgotten what it meant to build, to hope, to live for something beyond the next battle. Your government won't accept this easily, Arya continued. Neither will mine. There are those who profit from our conflict, who will do everything to sabotage peace. Then we'll have to be smarter than them, and stronger. Arya's 4 eyes, fixed on him with an expression he couldn't quite read. You said it yourself, this has to start somewhere. I'm tired of ending wars only to see new ones begin. Maybe it's time I tried something different. Such as... Marcus looked around the chamber, at humans and Valari beginning to talk, to share, to see each other as more than enemies. Such as making sure this war stays ended. Such as building something better from the ashes. Arya extended her hand again. All 4 arms this time, a gesture of complete trust among her people. Then we build together. Marcus Kane, human and Valari, soldier and scientist, breaker and healer. Marcus took all 4 hands, feeling the cool touch of her scales, the strength in her grip. Together. As the hour progressed, the framework of peace began to take shape. Serac's confession was recorded, evidence of his crimes compiled. Plans were made for a joint commission to investigate war crimes on both sides. It wouldn't be easy. There was too much blood, too much pain for easy forgiveness. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, Marcus thought as he watched Human and Valari work side by side, a beginning was all you needed. The first phase of ending the war was complete. But as he caught Arya's eyes across the room, those 4 luminous orbs that held both steel and starlight, Marcus realized something else was beginning too. Something neither of them had expected or planned for. Something that might be even more powerful than ending a war. Something that might actually heal 2 worlds. The secure facility on the human side of Draveris felt like a cage, even though Marcus technically wasn't a prisoner. 3 days had passed since the observatory incident, and the fragile ceasefire held by threads thinner than Valari silk. He stood at the reinforced window, watching the twin suns of Krios paint the ice fields in shades of amber and crimson. You're brooding again, Dr. Harlan Miles observed from the doorway. That's becoming a habit. Marcus didn't turn. I'm thinking. About her. About the war. But they both knew he was lying. Arya Vera had been transferred to this facility yesterday, officially as a prisoner of war, unofficially as a negotiator for peace. Marcus had been tasked with her interrogation, though Commander Cross had made it clear that this was to be an intelligence-gathering operation, not torture. The Senate wants results, Harlan continued, settling into a chair. Cross has been in communication with them all morning. They're not happy about the deviation from the original mission. The Senate can go... Yes, I'm sure they can, Harlan interrupted with a wry smile. But that doesn't change the reality. If you can't extract actionable intelligence from Arya, they'll send someone who will use less pleasant methods. Marcus finally turned from the window. She won't break under torture. She's too strong for that. But not too strong for you. The question hung between them. Marcus had built his reputation on breaking people, but not through pain. He found their weaknesses, their doubts, their hidden truths, and used them like surgical instruments. It was cleaner than torture, but sometimes more cruel. She's expecting me, Marcus said, changing the subject. Might as well get this over with. The walk to the interrogation sector was short, but gave Marcus time to review what he knew. Arya had come willingly, Part of the agreement reached at the observatory. She would provide intelligence about Valari military capabilities in exchange for human cooperation in prosecuting Serac. It was a show of good faith that had surprised everyone, especially the hardliners who preferred their enemies simple and monstrous. The interrogation room was deliberately neutral white walls, standard furniture, nothing that could be used as a weapon. Arya sat at the metal table, her 4 hands folded calmly in front of her. Her scales had shifted to a muted green, which Marcus had learned indicated contemplation among the Valari. She looked up as he entered, all 4 eyes tracking his movement. "Marcus Kane," she said, her voice carrying that strange harmonic quality that all Valari possessed. "I was wondering when you would come." He sat across from her, placing a datapad on the table. "This is being recorded, as agreed. Your cooperation has been noted by both governments." "Governments," she repeated, scales shifting slightly toward blue. "Such a clinical word for the entities that send us to kill each other. Would you prefer regimes' power structures? The word doesn't change what they are." "No, but it changes how we think about them." She leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, Marcus, what do your superiors really want from these sessions?" "Information about Valari military positions, defensive capabilities, strategic resources. All things that will be irrelevant if peace is achieved. And very relevant if it isn't." She studied him with those unnerving 4 eyes. "You don't believe peace is possible. I believe peace is a pause between wars. Always has been, always will be." "How terribly human of you." The insult, if it was one, was delivered without heat. Marcus pulled up the first set of questions on his datapad, official inquiries about troop movements and supply lines. But before he could begin, Arya spoke again. "Would you like to know the real difference between humans and Valari?" "I'm sure you're going to tell me." "Humans lie to themselves. You create elaborate justifications for your actions. Dress up your violence in ideology and righteousness. Valari are more honest. When we kill, we acknowledge it as killing. When we hate, we call it hate." "And yet your High Marshal convinced your people that genocide was justice." Arya's scales flickered through several colors: surprise, anger, shame. Serac was an aberration, or perhaps he learned too well from studying your species. Convenient excuse. "Is it?" She leaned back, a gesture that would have been casual, if not for the tension in her secondary arms. "Tell me, how does your alliance justify the bombardment of Thylos colony? 40,000 Valari civilians turned to ash in minutes." "Thylos was a military installation. Thylos was a refugee camp with a communication array. Your intelligence knew this. They struck anyway." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd read the reports on Thylos, seen the designation as a military target, but looking at Arya now, at the certainty in her expression, doubt crept in. "You're lying," he said, though the words lacked conviction. "I can provide sensor data, refugee manifests, even recordings of your pilots acknowledging the civilian presence before striking." Her scales had shifted to a deep purple sorrow, he realized. "But you don't really want that proof, do you? Because then, you'd have to question everything else you've been told." Marcus stood abruptly, needing movement, needing distance from those knowing eyes. "This isn't about Thylos." "No. Then what is it about trading military secrets that will be obsolete in weeks? Or is it about something else entirely?" He turned to face her. "What do you want, Arya?" "The same thing you want, even if you won't admit it. An end to the killing. A future where our species don't destroy each other over resources we could share." "Pretty words. But your military still has 17 combat divisions positioned around this system. That doesn't suggest peaceful intentions. Just as your alliance has 3 dreadnoughts in orbit, each capable of glassing this planet." She stood as well, her height matching his. "We circle each other like predators, each waiting for the other to show weakness. But what if we both showed strength instead? The strength to stop. You really believe it's that simple? I believe it's that hard. She moved around the table, closing the distance between them. But I also believe you're tired of the alternative. I saw it in your eyes at the observatory. The weariness of someone who's ended too many conflicts to believe in their purpose anymore. Marcus found himself unable to step back as she approached. This close, he could see the intricate patterns in her scales, the way they shifted and moved like living art. Her 4 eyes held depths he hadn't expected, intelligence and pain in equal measure. This is manipulation, he said quietly. Yes, she agreed without hesitation. But that doesn't make it untrue. She reached out with one of her secondary hands, stopping just short of touching him. Your files call you the breaker, but what I saw at the observatory wasn't a breaker. It was a builder, someone trying to construct peace from pieces of war. You don't know me. I know you chose not to kill me when ordered. I know you protected me from your own command structure. I know you're here, talking, instead of using the neural probes your intelligence services prefer. Her hand dropped. That tells me enough. Marcus felt his carefully constructed walls cracking. This was why he was really the breaker, not because he broke others, but because he recognized the broken places in them that matched his own. Sit, he said, returning to his chair. Let's talk, really talk, not this dance of words and implications. Arya returned to her seat, scales shifting to a neutral blue. What would you like to know? Start with Serac. How did he gain so much power? How did he convince your people to follow him into this war? For the first time, Arya looked genuinely uncomfortable. That's a longer story than you might think. It begins before the war, before first contact even. Serac was part of our scientific council, brilliant but ambitious. He theorized that other intelligent species would inevitably be competitors for resources. That conflict was a mathematical certainty. Social Darwinism on a galactic scale. Essentially, when your colony ships arrived in the system, he saw it as validation of his theories. 2 species, limited resources, inevitable conflict. He positioned himself as the one who had predicted this, the one who could lead us through it. But that's not how first contact went. The initial meetings were peaceful. For 3 years, yes, cultural exchange, trade negotiations, even some intermarriage. Her scales rippled with what might have been nostalgia. I was part of the xenobiology team studying human physiology. We were fascinated by your adaptability, your genetic diversity. Marcus filed that information away. What changed? The Meridian incident. He knew the name. Every human soldier did. The Meridian mining station, destroyed with all hands, 300 human colonists killed. It had been the spark that lit the war. Your people destroyed Meridian, Marcus said, though something in Arya's expression made him pause. That's what both sides were told. A Valari extremist cell, acting without authorization. But Serac's rise to power after the incident was convenient. Within days, he was High Marshal, granted emergency powers to defend against human retaliation. You're suggesting he orchestrated it? I'm suggesting that truth is the first casualty in war, and Serac was always good at shaping truth to his needs. She pulled out a small device from a hidden pocket, sliding it across the table. This contains communication logs from the days before Meridian, encrypted. But your codebreakers should be able to crack them. They paint an interesting picture of who benefited from that tragedy. Marcus pocketed the device, knowing he was crossing a line by accepting potential evidence without logging it first. Why didn't you expose this before? Who would have believed me? A scientist trying to discredit the High Marshal during wartime. I would have been executed for treason. It took 3 years to build enough support to move against him. And now he's in custody, but the war continues. Because stopping a war is harder than starting one. Both sides have invested too much blood to simply walk away. She met his gaze directly. Unless Someone forces them to see the cost of continuing. Someone like us? Who else? The politicians are safe in their capitals. The generals see statistics, not faces. But we've been in the mud and ice. We've seen the dead pile up. If we don't speak the truth, who will? Marcus laughed, bitter and short. You have a lot of faith in two people's ability to change the course of history. I have faith in the power of inconvenient truths, such as the fact that humans and Valari are genetically compatible enough to produce offspring. The statement hit like a physical blow. Marcus stared at her, processing the implications. That's impossible. We're different species. Different, but not incompatible. The xenobiology team confirmed it years ago, though the information was classified by both governments. Can you imagine the reaction if it became known? The racial purists on both sides would lose their minds. Why are you telling me this? Because it's harder to commit genocide against people your children might marry. Because truth, even uncomfortable truth, is the enemy of war. She paused, scales shifting to a deeper blue. And because I trust you to use this information wisely. Before Marcus could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. The lights shifted to emergency amber, and his communication implant crackled to life. All personnel to defensive positions. We have incoming hostiles. Repeat, incoming hostiles. Marcus was on his feet instantly, hand going to his sidearm. Valari attack. No, Arya said, her scales shifting to alarmed orange. Those are evacuation alarms. Someone's attacking both sides. They moved to the door, finding it locked down, standard procedure during an alert. Marcus input his override code, but nothing happened. System's not responding, he muttered, trying again. Marcus! Arya's voice was tight with concern. If someone's locked down the facility while attacking, they're not trying to invade. They're trying to destroy it. The realization hit them both simultaneously. The facility housed not just Arya, but also critical intelligence assets and, more importantly, evidence of Sirach's crimes. Someone wanted all of it gone. Marcus pulled out his tactical pad, bypassing the standard channels to connect directly with Kalen's unit. His friend's face appeared, streaked with dirt and blood. Marcus, thank God. We've got a situation here. Report. Unknown forces, using both human and Valari tech. They hit the perimeter hard, but it's a diversion. The real threat's inside. Someone's activated the facility's self-destruct protocol. That's impossible. Only Cross has those codes. Tell that to the countdown timer. We've got maybe 15 minutes before this whole place goes nuclear. Marcus turned to Arya. Can your people extract you? Not in time. The nearest Valari forces are 20 minutes out. She was already working on the door's control panel with her secondary arms, scales flickering with concentration. But I might be able to override this lock if you can access the maintenance subnet. Marcus didn't hesitate, pulling up the facility's technical schematics on his pad. Here, Junction 77 Alpha. As they worked, he couldn't help but notice the efficiency of their cooperation. No discussion needed, just instant understanding of what needed to be done. In another life, they might have made a formidable team. The door finally hissed open, revealing a corridor filled with smoke and the distant sound of weapons fire. Marcus took point, weapon drawn, with Arya close behind. We need to reach the command center, he said. Stop the self-destruct from there. Or find out who started it, Arya added. They moved through the facility, avoiding the main corridors where fighting was heaviest. Marcus's knowledge of the layout, combined with Arya's ability to sense heat signatures, with her secondary eyes, kept them out of immediate danger. They were 3 levels from the command center when they encountered the first bodies, human and Valari soldiers, killed not in combat but executed. Clean shots to the head. Professional work. Death squads, Marcus muttered. Someone's cleaning house. Eliminating witnesses, Arya corrected, examining one of the Valari bodies. This was one of Serac's inner circle. He was supposed to testify about the false flag operations. A sound made them both freeze footsteps, moving with military precision. Marcus pulled Arya into an alcove, pressing close in the confined space. He could feel the cool touch of her scales against his skin, smell something like ozone and copper that must have been her natural scent. A squad of soldiers passed, wearing unmarked armor that could have been either human or Volari design. They moved with the efficiency of professionals, checking corners and doorways as they advanced. After they passed, Arya whispered, "Those aren't regular military." "Private contractors, mercenaries." Working for whom? Marcus had a sick feeling he knew. Someone who benefits from this war continuing. Someone who can't afford to have Serac's crimes exposed. They continued toward the command center, but as they got closer, the resistance increased. Not from the mercenaries, but from automated defenses that had somehow been activated. Marcus recognized the pattern. Someone was hurting them, controlling their movement. "It's a trap," he said as they reached the final corridor to the command center. "Obviously, but do we have a choice?" The countdown timer on his pad showed 8 minutes remaining. Not enough time to go around. Not enough time for anything but forward. "Stay close," Marcus said, checking his weapon one final time. They burst into the command center together, expecting resistance. Instead, they found Commander Cross standing alone, her weapon trained on them. "I was wondering when you'd arrive," she said calmly. "Commander." Marcus kept his weapon low, but ready. "What's going on?" "Cleaning up a mess, Kane. One you created by deviating from the mission. You activated the self-destruct." "The war needs to continue," Cross said, her voice eerily calm. "Too many people have invested too much to let it end now. The defense contractors, the mining consortiums, even some members of the Senate. Peace would cost them trillions. So you're going to kill everyone here, your own people. Casualties of war. They'll be remembered as heroes who died in a Volari sneak attack. Just like you'll be remembered as the soldier who was tragically fooled by enemy manipulation." She shifted her aim to Arya. "And she'll be the villain who orchestrated it all." "You're insane," Marcus said. "I'm practical. This war has made me rich. Kane. Made a lot of people rich. We're not letting idealists like you throw that away for some fantasy of peace." Marcus saw the moment Cross decided to fire, saw her finger tighten on the trigger. He moved without thinking, throwing himself in front of Arya as the weapon discharged. The plasma bolt took him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He heard Arya cry out, saw her moving with inhuman speed. Her secondary arms extended, one striking Cross's weapon away, while another connected with the commander's throat. Cross went down, gasping. Arya didn't kill her, though Marcus could see she wanted to. Instead, she rushed to his side, her hands surprisingly gentle as she examined his wound. "You fool," she said, scales shifting through a rainbow of colors he couldn't interpret. "Why?" "Couldn't let her kill the only person who might actually end this war." Marcus managed through gritted teeth. "Liar!" But there was something soft in her voice. The countdown timer showed 5 minutes. Marcus forced himself to focus, pushing through the pain. "Can you stop it?" Arya was already at the command console, her 4 hands working independently across multiple interfaces. "The codes have been changed. I'd need Cross's biometric signature to..." She paused, looking at the unconscious commander. "Or I could try something else." "What?" "Volari systems use quantum encryption. If I can sync it with the human system, create a feedback loop. That would fry every electronic system in the facility. Including the nuclear device?" She looked at him, all 4 eyes serious. "But it would also knock out life support, communications, everything. We'd be trapped here until rescue arrives." "Do it!" Arya's hands flew across the controls, code streaming across the screens faster than Marcus could follow. The countdown hit 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute. With 30 seconds remaining, She initiated the feedback loop. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Every screen in the command center exploded in showers of sparks. The lights died, emergency power failed, and they were plunged into absolute darkness. Then silence. Marcus activated his suit's emergency light, the beam cutting through the darkness to find Arya slumped over the console. For a heart-stopping moment, he thought she was dead. Then she stirred, scales flickering weakly. "Did it work?" she asked. The absence of nuclear detonation was answer enough. Marcus moved to secure Cross, using restraint cords from his tactical kit, despite the burning pain in his shoulder. The commander was beginning to stir, but she wouldn't be a threat bound and watched. "We need to get to the surface," Marcus said. "The backup generators should kick in soon, but this place is going to be chaos." They made their way through the darkened facility, guided by emergency lighting that flickered to life sporadically. The mercenaries were gone, vanished like smoke once their mission failed. They found survivors humans and Valari alike, confused and frightened, but alive. Kalen met them at the main entrance, relief evident on his scarred face. "Marcus, we thought you were dead when the systems went down." "Almost was. Kalen, meet Arya Vera." "Arya, this is Kalen, my oldest friend and the worst card player in 3 systems." "This is hardly the time for introductions," Kalen said, but he nodded respectfully to Arya. "Ma'am, thank you for not killing us all." "The day is young," Arya replied dryly, earning a surprised laugh from Kalen. As they emerged into the frigid air of Cryos, Marcus saw that both human and Valari forces had responded to the crisis. They stood in separate groups, weapons lowered but ready, uncertainty written on every face. "What happens now?" Arya asked quietly. Marcus looked at the assembled soldiers, at the smoking facility behind them, at the evidence of betrayal from within their own ranks. "Now, we tell the truth. All of it. Cross's betrayal, the war profiteering, everything. They might not believe us. Then we make them believe." He turned to face her fully, noting how her scales caught the light of Krios's twin suns. "You were right before. 2 people might not be able to change history, but 2 people with the truth. That's different." Dr. Harlan appeared from the crowd, medical kit in hand. "Marcus, you're bleeding rather profusely. Perhaps we could save the world after you don't die." As Harlan worked on his shoulder, Marcus watched Arya address her own people, explaining what had happened in Rapid Valari. He saw the shock on their faces, the anger, but also something else, hope. "She's quite something," Harlan observed, following his gaze. "She's the enemy," Marcus said automatically. "Is she? Because from where I'm standing, she just saved your life and stopped a nuclear disaster." Harlan finished applying the battlefield dressing. "Also, the way you look at her suggests enemy isn't quite the right word." Marcus wanted to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. Something had shifted in that command center when he'd taken a plasma bolt meant for her, when she'd risked everything to save them all. "It's complicated," he said finally. "The best things usually are." Harlan packed up his kit. "For what it's worth, I think you 2 might actually pull this off. End the war. I mean, why? Because you're both too stubborn to fail, and you seem to bring out the best in each other. She makes you believe in something beyond violence, and you make her believe it's possible to trust again." Before Marcus could respond, Arya returned, her scales now a steady blue-green that he was beginning to recognize as her default state when calm. "My people want to meet with yours," she said, "to discuss joint investigation of today's attack. And if my people refuse, then we investigate alone and publish our findings to every media outlet in known space." There was steel in her voice. "The truth will come out. Marcus, the question is whether we control how it's revealed." Marcus nodded, understanding the stakes. They stood at a crossroads, with the future of 2 species hanging in the balance, It would have been easier to let the war continue, to follow orders and collect his pay. But easier had never been his style. "Together then," he said, offering his hand. Arya took it, her scales warm against his skin. Together, as the twin suns set over the frozen landscape of Krios, casting long shadows across the assembled soldiers, Marcus allowed himself a moment of hope. The war wasn't over. Not yet. There were still those who would fight to keep it going, to preserve their profits and power. But for the first time in his career, Marcus Kane wasn't fighting to end something. He was fighting to begin it. And as he stood there, hand in hand with someone who should have been his enemy, he realized that perhaps the real strength wasn't in breaking things apart. Perhaps it was in holding them together. The Joint Investigation Headquarters was a study in controlled chaos. Human and Volari investigators worked side by side, their mutual distrust barely contained beneath professional courtesy. Marcus stood at the central holo display, watching data streams from Cross's interrogation overlay with financial records that Arya's people had uncovered. 43 shell companies, Arya said, her four hands manipulating the data with practiced ease. All leading back to the same source, the Meridian Syndicate. "Never heard of them," Kalen said from his position by the door. "Because they don't officially exist," Marcus replied, highlighting a series of transactions. "But look at the timing. Every major escalation in the war corresponds with massive profit spikes for these companies. Weapons, medical supplies, reconstruction contracts. War is business," Dr. Harlan observed from where he was reviewing Cross's psychological profile. "And business has been very good." It had been a week since the facility incident. Cross was in custody. But her network ran deeper than anyone had suspected. Every day brought new revelations, new connections between the war profiteers and government officials on both sides. Arya's scales shifted to a troubled purple as she pulled up another file. "This is worse than we thought. The Syndicate has members in both the Terran Senate and the Volari High Council. They've been coordinating, ensuring the war continues regardless of military victories or defeats. Playing both sides," Marcus said, feeling sick. "How many died for their profit margins?" 200,000 confirmed, Arya said quietly. "Perhaps twice that in collateral damage." The room fell silent. The number was staggering, made worse by the knowledge that it had all been orchestrated. Not a war of ideology or resources, but a manufactured conflict designed to generate wealth for a select few. "We need to go public with this," Marcus said finally. "With what?" Kalen challenged. "Data that most people won't understand, accusations against officials who control the media. They'll bury us." "Not if we make it impossible to ignore." Arya moved to the tactical display, pulling up a map of Krios. "In 3 days, both governments are holding a joint memorial for the war dead. It's being broadcast across all systems, a show of potential reconciliation." "Let me guess," Marcus said, already seeing where she was going. "You want to hijack the broadcast?" "Not hijack. Enhance." Her scales shimmered with determination. "We present our evidence during the ceremony, when the entire galaxy is watching. Make it impossible to suppress or spin." "That's insane," Kalen said. "Security will be massive. Every important official from both governments will be there." "Exactly," Arya replied, "including the conspirators. We can expose them all at once." Marcus studied the plan forming in his mind. It was risky, potentially suicidal if it went wrong, but it was also their best chance at ending not just this war, but preventing future ones. "We'll need inside help," he said. "Someone with access to the broadcast systems." "I know someone," Arya said. "A technician named Thaxis. He lost his entire family in one of Serac's false flag operations. He'll help." "And if it fails," Arya met his gaze directly, "then we die as truth-tellers rather than live as accomplices to genocide." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, admiration, attraction, and something deeper he wasn't ready to name. When did you become so human in your thinking? When I met a human worth emulating, she replied, and for a moment, the space between them seemed to disappear. Harlan cleared his throat. If you two are done with your moment, perhaps we should discuss the small matter of not dying. The planning took 2 days. Every detail had to be perfect, every contingency accounted for. Marcus found himself working closer with Arya than ever before, their minds synchronizing in ways that should have been impossible between species. Late one night, as they reviewed security protocols, Arya asked, "What will you do after, when the war ends? When there's no more need for the breaker?" Marcus hadn't thought about it. His entire adult life had been defined by conflict. "I don't know. I was a scientist once. Perhaps I could be again." She paused, scales shifting to a softer blue. "Though I think I've learned things in war that might be valuable in peace. Such as, that understanding between species isn't just possible, it's essential. That differences can be strength rather than weakness." She looked at him directly. "That even enemies can become something else." The air between them crackled with unspoken possibility. Marcus found himself leaning closer, drawn by something beyond logic or reason. But before either could act, alarms began blaring throughout the compound. "Incoming transmission," Kalen announced, rushing into the room. "It's Serac. He wants to talk." The war criminal appeared on the main display, his scales dull and gray from his confinement, but his 4 eyes burned with intensity. "Arya Vera," he said without preamble. "I know what you're planning." "Impossible," Arya said, but Marcus could hear the uncertainty. "You forget. I still have loyalists. They tell me everything." Serac leaned forward. "You plan to expose the syndicate during the memorial. It won't work." "Watch us," Marcus said. Serac's laugh was bitter. "Oh, I intend to, but not for the reasons you think. You see, I've spent considerable time thinking in my cell, about the war, about my actions, about the truth you showed me. And I've decided you're right. The war must end, but not through your careful exposure of evidence. That will only lead to cover-ups, scapegoats, the real criminals escaping justice." "Then how?" Arya demanded. "By giving them what they fear most, a unified enemy." His scales shifted to a deep red. "I'm going to confess. Everything. The false flags, the murdered civilians, the syndicate's involvement. But more than that, I'm going to reveal the one truth that will shatter both governments' credibility forever." "What truth?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he knew. "That humans and Valari can produce offspring. That we're not separate species fighting for survival, but cousins capable of becoming one people." Serac's expression was savage. "Imagine the panic among the purists, the zealots who've built their power on racial hatred." "You'll cause chaos," Arya protested. "I'll cause revolution. And from that chaos, perhaps something better can grow." He looked directly at Marcus. "You wanted to break the war. Breaker. This is how it's done. Not with careful plans and evidence, but with truth so devastating it shatters everything." The transmission ended, leaving them in stunned silence. "He's insane," Kalen said finally. "He's guilty," Harlan corrected. "And seeking redemption through destruction. Classic psychological response to overwhelming remorse." "Can he actually do it?" Marcus asked Arya. "Does he have access to broadcast systems from his cell?" Arya was already checking, her hands flying across multiple interfaces. "Not directly, but yes. If his loyalists are positioned correctly, he could override the memorial broadcast. Then we have a problem. 2 competing revelations could cancel each other out, make it all look like theater. Unless we coordinate," Arya said slowly, an idea forming. "What if we don't compete with Serac's confession but amplify it? Use his revelation to support our evidence?" Marcus saw it immediately. He provides the emotional impact. We provide the proof. Together, it becomes undeniable. You're talking about working with a war criminal, Kalen pointed out. I'm talking about using a war criminal, Marcus corrected. There's a difference. The next day brought an unexpected visitor, Admiral Harrison, Marcus's former commanding officer and one of the few military leaders he respected, arrived at the compound with a small security detail. Kane, he said simply, we need to talk. They met in private, the Admiral's weathered face showing the strain of recent events. I know what you're planning. Sir, don't insult my intelligence. Son. Crosses interrogation. The evidence you've gathered word spreads, even in classified circles. He paused, seeming to weigh his words. I'm not here to stop you. Marcus couldn't hide his surprise. Sir, I've been fighting wars for 30 years. Kane. I've seen good soldiers die for bad reasons. Watched politicians trade lives for votes. This war. He shook his head. This war stinks of manipulation. Has from the beginning. Then help us end it. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. I can't actively support you, but I can ensure that certain security protocols are relaxed during the memorial. Windows of opportunity, you might say. Why? Because I have a grandson, Kane, 8 years old. I'd like him to grow up in a galaxy where humans and Valari aren't trying to exterminate each other. He stood to leave, then paused. That Valari scientist, Vera. You trust her. With my life. Interesting choice of words. Harrison's expression was knowing. Be careful, son. Wars end, but their consequences echo for generations. After the Admiral left, Marcus found Arya on the observation deck, staring out at the frozen landscape of Cryos. The twin suns were setting, painting the ice in shades of gold and crimson. Your Admiral is a good man, she said without turning. One of the few. It's strange, isn't it? How war brings out both the worst and best in people? She turned to face him, scales shimmering in the dying light. I've been thinking about what Serac said, about humans and Valari becoming one people. And would it be so terrible? She moved closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her scales. We're more alike than different. We love, we fear, we hope. We also kill each other quite efficiently. We did, but perhaps we don't have to anymore. She reached out with one of her secondary hands, touching his face gently. Marcus, what are we doing? He knew she wasn't talking about the mission. The attraction between them had been building since that first confrontation at the observatory, a pull that defied species and circumstance. I don't know, he admitted, covering her hand with his. But it feels like the only real thing in all this madness. She kissed him then, a collision of different biologies that somehow worked. Her scales were smooth and warm against his skin, her forearms embracing him in ways that felt both alien and perfectly right. When they parted, both were breathing hard. This complicates everything, she said. Everything's already complicated. This just makes it worthwhile. They stood together watching the last light fade, knowing that tomorrow would bring either triumph or disaster. But in that moment, the war seemed very far away. The morning of the memorial dawned clear and cold. The ceremony was being held at the Grand Necropolis, a massive structure that served as a monument to the war dead of both species. Marcus stood with his team, watching as dignitaries from both governments arrived. Positions, he asked through the encrypted comm. Thaxis is in place, Arya's voice responded. Broadcast systems are ready. Serac. His loyalists confirmed. He'll make his move during the eulogy. Marcus scanned the crowd, identifying the syndicate members they'd identified. They moved through the gathering like predators, confident in their anonymity. That would change soon enough. The ceremony began with the traditional honors of Valari honor guard presenting arms, while a human choir sang a funeral hymn. The symbolism was heavy-handed, but effective. Two species, mourning together. The Terran president spoke first, his words carefully scripted to acknowledge loss without admitting fault. Then, the Valari prime minister, equally diplomatic in her vagueness. Marcus waited, tension building with each passing moment. Then, in the middle of the prime minister's speech, the broadcast flickered. Serac's face appeared on every screen, every holo display. He looked different, clear-eyed, his scales restored to their natural green. "People of Terra and Velar," he began, his voice carrying the weight of authority even in disgrace. "I am Serac, former High Marshal of the Valari forces. I stand before you to confess to crimes against both our species." The crowd erupted in confusion, security forces moving to cut the transmission. But Thaxus had done his work well. The broadcast continued. "I orchestrated the Meridian incident that began this war," Serac continued. "I murdered Valari civilians and blamed it on humans. I executed loyal soldiers who refused to participate in atrocities. I did this not for victory, but for profit." Marcus watched the syndicate members, saw them trying to flee. But Admiral Harrison's people were ready, blocking exits with military precision. "But I was not alone," Serac said. And here Arya's contribution began. Data streams appeared alongside his image financial records, communication logs, names and faces of the conspirators. The Meridian Syndicate, composed of officials from both governments, has orchestrated this entire conflict. They have traded your lives for wealth, your children's futures for power. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. Marcus saw government officials trying to maintain composure while their crimes were laid bare for the galaxy to see. But Serac wasn't done. "There is one more truth you must know. Humans and Valari are not the incompatible species we've been told. We can interbreed, produce offspring. We are not enemies by nature, but by choice. And that choice was made for us by those who profit from our division." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Some voices raised in anger, others in shock. But Marcus noticed something else, young humans and Valari in the crowd moving closer together, as if the revelation had given them permission to acknowledge what they'd already suspected. "I do not ask for forgiveness," Serac concluded. "I ask only that you learn from my crimes. End this war. Build something better. Prove that we are more than the worst among us." The broadcast ended, leaving chaos in its wake. But it was controlled chaos, directed. Security forces were already arresting identified syndicate members. Government officials were being questioned by suddenly aggressive journalists. Marcus found Arya in the crowd, her scales shifting through a rainbow of emotions. "It worked," she said, disbelief in her voice. "It's not over," Marcus warned, watching the crowd dynamics. "This is just the beginning, the real work." He was cut off by the sound of weapons fire. A group of hardliners, both human and Valari, had decided to make their own statement. They opened fire, indiscriminately, targeting anyone they saw as traitors to their respective species. Marcus moved without thinking, pulling Arya behind cover as plasma bolts seared the air where they'd been standing. Around them, security forces engaged the attackers. But the crowd was panicking, people trampling each other in their desperation to escape. "We need to get to the command post," Marcus shouted over the chaos. They fought their way through the crowd, Marcus's combat training and Arya's agility keeping them alive. They found Kaelin and Harlan pinned down near the memorial's main entrance. "About time," Kaelin shouted, laying down covering fire. "Thought you two had decided to elope." "Later," Marcus replied, assessing the tactical situation. The hardliners had taken defensive positions, using the memorial's architecture for cover. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. This was desperation, not strategy. "They're trying to restart the war," Arya realized. Create enough bloodshed that reconciliation becomes impossible. Not happening, Marcus said grimly. He activated his comm, connecting to both human and Valari military frequencies. All units, this is Marcus Kane. We have a common enemy, extremists, trying to sabotage the peace. Coordinate your fire. Protect the civilians. Show them that we can work together. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, human and Valari forces began working in tandem. A human squad would lay down suppressing fire, while Valari soldiers flanked. Valari medics treated human wounded. The extremists, faced with united opposition, began to falter. The battle was brief, but vicious. When it ended, 17 extremists lay dead, with dozens more in custody. The memorial ground was scarred with weapons fire, but the alliance between human and Valari forces had held. As the dust settled, Marcus found himself at the center of a gathering crowd. Humans and Valari, soldiers and civilians, all looking to him and Arya for direction. "The war is over," Arya announced, her voice carrying across the plaza. "Not because politicians decreed it, but because we choose to end it. Today, humans and Valari fought together against those who would keep us divided. Let that be the legacy of this memorial, not the dead we mourn, but the future we build." A young human soldier stepped forward, removing his helmet. "Ma'am, sir, what happens now?" Marcus looked at Arya, seeing his own uncertainty reflected in her eyes. Then he made a decision that would define the rest of his life. "Now we do the hard work," he said. "We investigate every crime, prosecute every war profiteer, rebuild what was destroyed. It won't be easy. There will be those on both sides who resist. But we've proven today that together, we're stronger than those who would divide us." "Together," Arya echoed, taking his hand in full view of the crowd. The gesture, simple as it was, spoke volumes. A human and a Valari, former enemies, now united. The crowd's response was mixed. Some cheered. Others looked uncomfortable. A few turned away in disgust. But most simply watched, processing this new reality. Dr. Harlan approached, medical kit in hand as always. "That was quite a speech. Think they bought it?" "Doesn't matter if they bought it," Marcus replied. "What matters is we believe it." As the immediate chaos subsided and officials began trying to restore order, Admiral Harrison approached. His expression was unreadable. "Kane, that was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen." "Possibly both, sir." Harrison looked at Arya, studying her with military precision. "Ms. Vera, your people fought well today, disciplined, controlled, protective of civilians. Everything we train our soldiers to be. As did yours, Admiral. Perhaps we're not so different after all." "Perhaps not." He turned back to Marcus. "There's going to be an inquiry. Questions about your relationship, about the decisions made here. Are you prepared for that?" Marcus felt Arya's hand tighten in his. "We are." "Good. Because what you've started here, it's going to change everything. The integration of our species, combined military operations, shared governance, it's all on the table now." "Sounds complicated," Marcus said. "Sounds like job security for the breaker," Harrison replied with a slight smile. "Though perhaps it's time for a new title. The Builder, maybe." As the Admiral walked away to coordinate with his Valari counterpart, Marcus turned to Arya. "He's right, you know. Everything's going to change." "Everything already has," she replied, her scales shifting to that warm blue he'd come to associate with contentment. "The question is whether we guide that change or let it guide us." Around them, the work of peace was beginning. Medical teams treating wounded regardless of species. Investigators collecting evidence with mixed human-Valari teams. Journalists interviewing soldiers who'd fought together against the extremists. It was messy, complicated, fraught with potential failure. But it was also real in a way the war had never been. Not manufactured conflict, but genuine cooperation, born from necessity and hope. "I meant what I said before," Marcus told Arya quietly, "about not knowing what comes after the war. But I think I'd like to find out with you." Arya's four eyes sparkled with an emotion that transcended species. "Even though I'm the enemy you were sent to kill." "Especially because of that. We've already overcome the worst beginning possible. Everything else should be easy by comparison." She laughed, a sound like crystal chimes that drew looks from nearby humans. "You have a strange definition of easy, Marcus Kane. You have a strange definition of enemy, Arya Vera." They stood together amid the ruins of the memorial, surrounded by the chaos of a world transforming. The war was ending, not with victory or defeat, but with the simple recognition that the future required both species to survive and thrive together. It wasn't the ending Marcus had planned when he arrived on Krios. But as he looked at Arya, at the mingled crowd of humans and Velarii beginning the hard work of peace, he realized it was better than anything he could have imagined. The Breaker had completed his final mission, not by destroying, but by building. And in doing so, he'd found something he hadn't even known. He was looking for a future worth fighting for, and someone to share it with. The abandoned communications relay station stood like a frozen monument against Krios's harsh landscape, its crystalline towers catching the pale light of dawn. Marcus checked his thermal readings for the 5th time, watching for any sign of pursuit. They'd been in hiding for 3 days now, ever since the memorial broadcast had thrown both governments into chaos. "Still clear," Kalen reported from his lookout position. "But that won't last. The bounty on your heads just hit 10 million credits." "Each or combined?" Marcus asked, attempting humor despite their situation. "Each. Apparently, you two are equally valuable as fugitives." Arya emerged from the station's interior. Her scales shifted to white for camouflage against the snow. "The equipment is older than expected, but functional. We can reach the outer colonies from here, maybe even the core worlds if we boost the signal." "And say what?" Dr. Harlan asked, warming his hands over a portable heater. "Hello, Galaxy. The 2 most wanted people in known space would like to chat." "We tell them the truth," Arya said simply, "again and again until they listen." Marcus studied the relay equipment through the transparent aluminum windows. The station had been abandoned when the war started, its strategic value deemed negligible. Now it might be their only chance to keep the peace movement alive. In the days following the memorial revelation, the response had been swift and brutal. Both governments had declared martial law, branded Marcus and Arya as terrorists, and launched massive propaganda campaigns to discredit their evidence. The syndicate's reach was longer than anyone had anticipated. "They're rewriting history as we speak," Marcus said, pulling up intercepted news feeds on his tactical pad. "According to the official story, we fabricated everything. Serac was coerced, the evidence was falsified, and the genetic compatibility claim is a dangerous lie." "But people saw the broadcast," Arya protested. "Millions witnessed it. And millions more are being told what they witnessed was enemy manipulation." Marcus felt the familiar weight of futility settling on his shoulders. "We broke the war, but we didn't break the system that created it." Arya moved to stand beside him, her secondary arms wrapping around his waist in a gesture that had become natural over the past days. "Then we break that too. With what army? We're 4 people against 2 governments and a shadow syndicate with unlimited resources." "5 people," a new voice said from the doorway. They all spun, weapons raising, to find Theron standing in the entrance. The Velarii prisoner Marcus had interrogated weeks ago looked healthier, his scales restored to their natural amber color. "How did you find us?" Arya demanded, not lowering her weapon. "Same way they will. Eventually. The thermal signature of this station is subtle but distinctive, if you know what to look for." Theron held up his 4 hands in surrender. "I'm alone, and I'm here to help." "Why?" Marcus asked. Because you saved my life with truth when my own people burned me with lies. Because the broadcast confirmed everything I suspected about Sirach. And because—" He paused, scales shifting to a deeper amber. "Because I have 47 soldiers who feel the same way, veterans who've seen too much, lost too much, to let the war continue." A resistance cell. Arya lowered her weapon slightly. "The beginning of one. There are others, humans too. Soldiers who've started asking questions. Civilians who've noticed the inconsistencies in the official story. Admiral Harrison sends his regards. By the way, he's under house arrest but managed to smuggle out intelligence before they locked him down." Theron produced a data crystal, offering it to Marcus. Locations of syndicate safe houses, financial records they thought were destroyed, and something else: communication logs between syndicate members discussing their contingency plans. Marcus plugged the crystal into his pad, scanning the data. His expression darkened as he read. "They're going to stage another false flag. Something big enough to restart full-scale warfare." "The colony ship," Arya breathed, reading over his shoulder. "They're going to destroy the Aurora's Dream." The Aurora's Dream was a generation ship carrying 50,000 colonist families, seeking new worlds beyond the war zone. Its destruction would be catastrophic, the kind of tragedy that would